Madison Bumgarner didn't just beat hitters. He confused them with a delivery so deceptive that even Hall of Fame batters would walk back to the dugout shaking their heads. He was the pitcher who threw 95-mile-per-hour fastballs that looked like changeups, and changeups that looked like fastballs. He was the country-strong lefty who made modern hitting analytics look foolish with an arm angle that should have never worked, but somehow dominated the biggest stages in baseball. So what made Bumgarner's pitching style so uniquely devastating? And why is it likely we'll never see another pitcher quite like him again? Well, this legendary approach was actually born from necessity in the small town of Hickory, North Carolina. While other kids his age were learning textbook mechanics from expensive pitching coaches, MadBum was developing his craft in his backyard, throwing to his dad after long days of farm work. This unconventional foundation would eventually become the blueprint for one of the most deceptive deliveries in modern baseball history. But it wasn't just his mechanics that made him special. It was how he combined old-school country toughness with a pitching IQ that could dissect any lineup. He was the anti-analytics pitcher who succeeded precisely because he couldn't be quantified by modern metrics. By the time Bumgarner reached the major leagues in 2019, baseball was rapidly evolving. Pitch counts were becoming sacred. Velocity was king. Relievers were specializing in single innings. And here comes this lanky kid from North Carolina who threw with an arm angle that looked like he was skipping stones across a pond. Scouts weren't sure what to make of him. His fastball sat in the low 90s when everyone was chasing triple digits. His delivery looked herky-jerky compared to the smooth, repeatable mechanics that were being taught in academies across the country. But there was something about the way hitters reacted to him that caught everyone's attention. They couldn't time him. They couldn't square him up. And most importantly, they couldn't figure out what was coming next. Because Madison Bumgarner had developed something that couldn't be taught in any pitching lab. A delivery so deceptive that it turned every at-bat into a guessing game where the hitter was always one step behind. To understand what made Bumgarner's style so unique, you have to go back to where it all began. Hickory, North Carolina. Population, 12,000. The kind of place where high school football is religion and baseball is played on fields that flood when it rains too hard. While kids in California and Florida were attending elite baseball academies with biomechanic labs and high-speed cameras, MadBum was throwing rocks at fence posts and learning to pitch by feel. His father, Kevin, was a mechanic who worked long hours but always made time to catch for his son in their backyard. No fancy equipment, no pitch tracking technology, just a father and son playing catch until the sun went down. This is where Bumgarner developed what would become his signature characteristic. That unusual arm angle that looked like he was throwing sidearm but wasn't quite submarine. It wasn't taught. It wasn't coached. It was just natural. And because it felt comfortable to him, he never tried to change it. But here's what made this so devastating for hitters. Most pitchers throw from a consistent arm slot, either over the top, 3/4, or sidearm. Hitters can adjust their timing and approach based on that consistent release point. Bumgarner's arm angle was somewhere in between, creating an optical illusion that made it nearly impossible for batters to pick up the ball cleanly. His fastball would appear to be coming from one angle, but his breaking balls would seem to materialize from somewhere completely different. It was like facing two different pitchers in the same at-bat. And because he developed this naturally, without overthinking the mechanics, he could repeat it consistently, something that's nearly impossible to teach. The country-strong aspect wasn't just about his background. It was about his mentality. While modern pitchers are being taught to maximize efficiency and preserve their arms, Bumgarner was learning to compete. Every pitch mattered. Every at-bat was a battle. And if his arm hurt the next day, well, that just meant he was working hard enough. This old-school approach would serve him well when he reached the majors, because he wasn't afraid to challenge hitters in ways that modern analytics said he shouldn't. He threw his fastball in fastball counts. He threw breaking balls behind in the count. He pitched backwards when conventional wisdom said to pitch forward. And it worked because hitters couldn't predict what was coming based on the situation. When Bumgarner took the mound, hitters thought they knew what they were getting. A tall left-hander with a decent fastball and good control. What they didn't realize was that they were about to face one of the most deceptive deliveries in baseball. It started with his setup. Most pitchers have a consistent pre-pitch routine that gives hitters timing cues. Bumgarner's routine was deliberately inconsistent. Sometimes he'd work quickly. Sometimes he'd take his time. Sometimes he'd look in for the sign immediately. Other times he'd stare down the batter first. This mental warfare began before he even started his windup. But the real magic happened in his delivery. From the hitter's perspective, Bumgarner's arm action created what pitching coaches call late life. His fastball would appear to be tracking toward one location, then suddenly dart in a different direction at the last possible moment. This wasn't because of exceptional movement on the pitch itself, it was because of the optical illusion created by his unique arm angle. Here's how it worked. Most left-handed pitchers release the ball from a consistent point that right-handed hitters can track. Bumgarner's release point was lower and more to the side, creating a different visual plane. When he threw his four-seam fastball, it would appear to be coming right down the middle, then suddenly tail away from right-handed batters at the last second. His changeup was even more devastating. Because of his arm angle, the changeup would mirror his fastball's trajectory for the first 50 feet, then drop off the table just as the hitter was committing to swing. The deception was so complete that even veteran hitters would be fooled by the same pitch multiple times in the same at-bat. But perhaps the most confusing pitch in his arsenal was his curveball. Thrown from his unique arm slot, it had a different break than traditional curveballs. Instead of the typical 12-6 break that hitters expect from left-handed pitchers, Bumgarner's curve had more of a slurvy action that seemed to come from nowhere. Watch any at-bat from his prime years and you'll see the same reaction from hitters over and over again. They'd start their swing, then suddenly try to adjust mid-swing as they realized the ball wasn't where they thought it would be. By then, it was too late. The ball was either in the catcher's mitt or weakly hit for an easy out. This deception wasn't just effective against average hitters. Some of the best hitters in the game struggled against Bumgarner precisely because they couldn't trust what their eyes were telling them. Players like Miguel Cabrera and Albert Pujols, who built their careers on recognizing pitches early, found themselves consistently off balance against MadBum's unique delivery. What separated Bumgarner from the other deceptive pitchers was his ability to combine his unusual delivery with legitimate power. This wasn't a soft-tossing lefty who relied solely on changing eye levels and arm angles. This was a pitcher who could reach back and throw 95 when he needed to, but was smart enough to know that velocity alone wouldn't get him out. The power element of his game came from that country-strong background. Hours of farm work had built functional strength that couldn't be replicated in a gym. His legs were tree trunks, his core was rock solid, and his arm, despite the unconventional angle, could generate serious heat when the situation called for it. But here's what made him truly special. He understood that power without deception is just throwing hard, and deception without power is just being crafty. Bumgarner had both, and he knew exactly when to use each tool. In fastball counts, when hitters were sitting on his heater, he'd throw his changeup with the same arm action and release point. The result was swing after swing at pitches that were already in the catcher's mitt. In breaking ball counts, when hitters were looking for something soft, he'd rear back and challenge them with his best fastball, often painting the corners with precision that seemed impossible given his delivery. This power-finesse combination was most evident in his approach to different types of hitters. Against free swingers who were looking to turn on a fastball, he'd work them with his changeup and curveball, using their aggressiveness against them. Against patient hitters who were trying to work deep counts, he'd attack the strike zone early with his fastball, daring them to hit his best pitch. The finesse aspect wasn't just about changing speeds. It was about changing the hitter's eye level and timing within the same at-bat. Bumgarner would throw a high fastball to get the hitter's eyes up, then come back with a low changeup that would buckle their knees. Or he'd start with a slow curveball to mess with their timing, then blow a fastball by them before they could even adjust. This approach was completely contrary to modern pitching philosophy, which emphasizes attacking hitters' weaknesses with your best pitches. Bumgarner attacked hitters' strengths with his deception, making their best swings look foolish. A pull hitter expecting a fastball away would get a changeup that looked like a fastball until it was too late. A contact hitter looking to go the other way would get a curveball that started in their happy zone before diving out of the strike zone. The result was an arsenal that couldn't be game planned against in the traditional sense. Hitters and coaches could study video all they wanted, but until they stepped in the box and tried to time that unique delivery, they had no idea what they were really facing. By the time Bumgarner hit his prime in early 2010s, baseball had entered the analytics era. Hitters had access to more information than ever before. They knew every pitcher's tendencies, their favorite counts, their most effective sequences. They studied heat maps and spin rates and release points until they could predict what was coming before the pitcher even went into his windup. And then they faced Madison Bumgarner, and all that preparation went out the window. The problem with trying to analyze Bumgarner was that his effectiveness couldn't be captured by traditional metrics. His spin rate wasn't exceptional. His velocity was good but not elite. His movement wasn't off the charts. On paper, he looked like a solid but unspectacular pitcher. But when hitters stepped into the box against him, they discovered that the numbers didn't tell the whole story. Modern hitters are trained to recognize pitch types based on release point and early trajectory. They use these visual cues to start their swing and adjust their timing. Bumgarner's delivery broke all these rules. His fastball and changeup looked identical out of his hand. His curveball had the same arm action as his heater. By the time hitters could distinguish what pitch was coming, they were already committed to their swing. This created a unique psychological challenge for opposing batters. Confidence is everything in hitting, and Bumgarner's deception eroded that confidence pitch by pitch. Hitters would walk back to the dugout after striking out on a pitch they thought they had timed perfectly, shaking their heads and questioning their own eyes. The most telling example of this came during his dominant 2014 postseason run. Some of the best hitters in baseball, guys like Mike Trout, Josh Donaldson, and Prince Fielder, looked completely overmatched against him. These weren't players who struggled with velocity or breaking balls. These were elite hitters who had seen every type of pitcher imaginable. But they had never seen anything quite like Bumgarner's unique combination of deception and stuff. What made it even more frustrating for hitters was that Bumgarner's approach seemed to violate everything they had been taught about pitch recognition. Conventional wisdom says that left-handed pitchers should have certain tendencies against right-handed hitters. Bumgarner ignored all of that. He'd throw his best pitch in any count to any hitter in any situation. The only constant was that hitters never knew what was coming. This unpredictability extended beyond just pitch selection. Bumgarner's unusual delivery meant that even when hitters guessed the right pitch, they still had to deal with the deception of his arm angle and release point. A fastball that should have been hittable became unhittable because of the optical illusion created by his mechanics. In an era where every pitch is tracked, measured, and analyzed, Madison Bumgarner represented something that couldn't be quantified. Pure pitching instinct combined with natural deception. He was the anti-analytics pitcher who succeeded precisely because he couldn't be broken down into neat statistical categories. Modern pitching development focuses on maximizing spin rate, optimizing release point, and creating consistent mechanics that can be repeated thousands of times. Bumgarner's approach was the opposite. His mechanics looked inconsistent to the naked eye, but they were perfectly consistent to him. His spin rate was good but not great, but his deception made every pitch more effective than the numbers suggested. This created a fascinating paradox. Teams with the most advanced analytics departments struggled to explain why Bumgarner was so effective. His expected stats based on exit velocity and launch angles suggested he should be getting hit harder. His pitch movement didn't grade out as elite. His velocity was declining as he aged, yet he continued to dominate hitters in ways the numbers couldn't predict. The answer lay in something that couldn't be measured by modern technology: the human element of hitting. Baseball is ultimately a game of split-second decisions and visual recognition. All the data in the world can't help a hitter if they can't trust what their eyes are telling them. And Bumgarner's delivery created visual confusion that no amount of video study could overcome. This was most evident in how opposing teams tried to prepare for him. They would show their hitters endless video clips breaking down his delivery frame by frame. They would create detailed scouting reports outlining his tendencies in different counts. They would use high-speed cameras to analyze his release points and spin access. And then their hitters would step into the box and look completely lost. The problem was that Bumgarner's effectiveness wasn't based on overpowering stuff or predictable patterns. It was based on deception that could only be experienced, not analyzed. You couldn't prepare for the way his fastball seemed to change direction at the last second. You couldn't time the way his changeup fell off the table. You couldn't predict the way his curveball seemed to come from a different arm slot entirely. This made him incredibly valuable in an era where most pitchers were becoming more predictable, not less. As analytics became more sophisticated, hitters were getting better at recognizing patterns and tendencies. But Bumgarner had no patterns. His only tendency was to be unpredictable. In a league full of pitchers who threw harder and had better stuff on paper, he stood out because he was impossible to figure out. What made Bumgarner's style so special was that it represented a dying breed in modern baseball. He was a throwback to an era when pitchers were artists, not just athletes. When deception mattered more than velocity. When outsmarting a hitter was just as valuable as overpowering them. Today's pitching development focuses on maximizing physical tools. Young pitchers are taught to throw as hard as possible, spin the ball as much as possible, and repeat their mechanics as precisely as possible. It's a scientific approach that has produced incredible results in terms of strikeout rates and velocity numbers. But it has also created a generation of pitchers who are more similar to each other than ever before. Bumgarner came from a different school of thought. He believed that pitching was about disrupting timing, changing eye levels, and keeping hitters off balance. His goal wasn't to throw the perfect pitch according to some biomechanical model. His goal was to make the hitter uncomfortable, uncertain, and ultimately unsuccessful. This philosophy extended to his approach on the mound. While modern pitchers are taught to attack the strike zone aggressively and challenge hitters with their best stuff, Bumgarner was willing to nibble, to work around the edges, to make hitters chase pitches they shouldn't swing at. He understood that getting a hitter out wasn't just about throwing strikes. It was about throwing strikes that looked like balls and balls that looked like strikes. His unique arm angle was the perfect tool for this approach. It allowed him to create deception without sacrificing stuff. He could still throw in the mid-90s when he needed to, but he could also make an 85-mile-per-hour changeup look like a 95-mile-per-hour fastball until it was too late for the hitter to adjust. This combination of old-school pitching philosophy and natural physical gifts made him nearly impossible to replicate. You can't teach someone to throw from Bumgarner's arm angle if it doesn't feel natural to them. You can't coach the kind of deception he created if a pitcher doesn't have the right physical attributes. And you can't develop his kind of pitching instinct if you're focused primarily on maximizing measurable physical tools. That's why we're unlikely to see another pitcher quite like Madison Bumgarner. The modern game has moved away from his style of pitching in favor of approaches that can be more easily quantified and replicated. Young pitchers are discouraged from developing unconventional deliveries that might be harder to repeat or more prone to injury. The emphasis is on efficiency and optimization, not on artistry and deception. Madison Bumgarner's unique pitching style didn't just make him effective, it made him unforgettable. In an era where most pitchers blend together in a blur of high-velocity fastballs and sharp breaking balls, MadBum stood out because he was genuinely different. He was the pitcher who made you lean forward in your seat, wondering how he was going to fool the next hitter. His deceptive delivery became his calling card, but was also his competitive advantage. While other pitchers had to rely on perfect execution of their best pitches, Bumgarner could get outs with mediocre execution because his deception made even average pitches look unhittable. A fastball that caught too much of the plate became effective because the hitter was expecting a changeup. A curveball that hung in the zone became a strikeout pitch because the hitter was fooled by the arm action. This ability to succeed without perfect stuff made him incredibly durable and consistent. He didn't need to be at his physical peak to be effective. As long as he could maintain his deceptive delivery, he could get major league hitters out even when his velocity declined or his command wasn't quite as sharp. The impact of his style extended beyond just his individual success. He proved that there was still room in modern baseball for pitchers who succeeded through guile rather than pure stuff. He showed that deception could be just as valuable as velocity, and that sometimes the most effective approach was the one that couldn't be easily categorized or replicated. For young pitchers watching Bumgarner dominate with his unconventional style, he represented a different path to success. Not everyone could throw 100 miles per hour or spin a curveball at 3,000 RPMs, but everyone could learn to be deceptive, to change eye levels, to disrupt timing. Bumgarner proved that there were many ways to get hitters out, and that sometimes the most effective way was the way that looked the least conventional. His legacy isn't just in the games he won or the strikeouts he recorded. It's in the reminder that baseball is still a game of human versus human, where psychology and deception can be just as important as physical tools. In a sport that's becoming increasingly dominated by data and analytics, Madison Bumgarner represented the enduring value of the human element possible. Because in the end, that's what made MadBum special. He didn't just pitch to hitters, he painted masterpieces that left them wondering what they had just witnessed. And in a game that's becoming more predictable every year, that kind of artistry is something truly worth celebrating.